This is Bradley Kaufman speaking to you from Goshen, Indiana. And it's my pleasure to share a few words about the genesis and the creation of Voices Together this evening. And we'll follow this time with a time for your questions as well. Thank you so much to everyone who participated in the Zoom feed this evening. We're so pleased at the turnout, and it's just been wonderful to share this moment. I want to start by giving deep, sincere gratitude to Daryl Newstetter-Barg, who stitched together literally every single piece of video that you saw there. So our heartfelt thanks to you, Daryl, for the many, many, many hours of work that you put into curating that dedication video for us. So I mentioned a moment ago, coming up after this short presentation, we'll have time for questions and answers. With nearly 1,000 screens involved in this presentation, we'll not be able to field everyone's questions. We'll focus on the ones that may have the most broad interest. And foremost on many of our minds, especially here in the States, is when will my hymnal arrive, or when will our hymnals arrive at our church? And we'll address that at the top of the Q&A time. So you can anticipate that as well as we continue here. So just taking us through a joyful introduction to Voices Together. This will be a time for sharing some of our excitement around Voices Together and what it offers. Seeds of a new collection were sown by the Mennonite Church Binational Worship Council in 2011, and that group released a discussion guide called The Heart of Mennonite Worship. This was a process that affirmed the desire for and the feasibility of creating a new hymnal. The project was commissioned and blessed by the denominations Mennonite Church Canada and Mennonite Church USA in 2016, and the project was funded and implemented by Minnow Media. The mandate was to establish a full new hymnal to succeed Hymnal Worship Book, Sing the Journey, and Sing the Story from 1992, 2005, and 2007, respectively. And of note, the two spiral-bound supplements, Sing the Journey and Sing the Story, were designed to have a 5-year life. So those books have provided rich material for worship and have held up well physically too. The purpose of the new collection is to support vibrant worship in which God calls us to be followers of Jesus Christ, and by the power of the Holy Spirit to grow as communities of grace, joy, and peace, so that God's healing and hope flow through us to the world. And these are the folks who were tasked
Bradley,
with this
we are
undertaking.
seeing your notes. Can you change the view?
This crew of volunteers was selected by application to do this work back in 2016. Between these two photos, Harrisonburg, Virginia in 2016, Cincinnati, Ohio in 2018, you might track anyway, two photos of our team. The first photo, there's some youthful naivete perhaps, and the second photo is a more seasoned look into our group. Also, one personnel change to point out, Emily Grimes needed to step away from committee work in the midst of job changes. And the second photo shows the addition of Alan Rudy Froese. The full committee will introduce themselves following this presentation. They'll all be on screen. As we began organizing ourselves around this work, we established forums for hearing from the church. We held worship leader focus groups, regional events, and church visits. We curated a series of samplers. The first one called A Great Day of Singing, which you may remember from 2017, with the ambitiously subtitled phrase, A Preview of the New Hymnal. Samplers, including this first one released in 2017, would continue to be important touch points for us to have congregations try out new material. And we opened an online portal for open submissions of new and original work. We circulated heart song surveys, inviting worshipers to name songs that are formative, songs that we reach for in particular seasons or occasions, songs that help us follow Jesus, songs that draw us together in community. This is a map just showing dots of concentrations of responses, the hundreds of responses that we received from folks like you all eager to share your heart songs. Songs mentioned at least 100 times in those surveys are shown here on your screen. One year of open submissions received roughly 2,300 worship resources, texts, tunes, songs, and visual art. In addition to open submissions, material came from many, many sources. We screened hymnals and supplements from ecumenical sources, songs from CCLI, that's the Christian Copyright Licensing International, which is a clearinghouse for contemporary worship music, single author collections, and other curated compilations. This pie chart shows the result of the committee work: 759 songs and 310 worship resources. And it shows a little bit about where this material comes from. So the left side of the pie chart accounts for material from the trilogy of hymnal and worship book, Sing the Journey and Sing the Story. In traditional hymnody, texts and tunes are sometimes portable. The two brown sections on the right at the top show the numbers of retained texts set to new music or new texts set to retained tunes. Then the purple segment on the right-hand side shows the number of fully new additions. We're excited that Voices Together offers new platforms for a Mennonite denominational hymnal. I might highlight that the tablet edition, located in the lower right-hand portion, offers a scalable image which can satisfy the need for large print for some users. Additionally, the tablet edition allows audio to be embedded on every hymn page. Currently, 100 songs have embedded audio samples in the VT tablet version, and we expect to be able to expand that over time. In addition to what you see here, the projection edition of Voices Together provides files for every song and worship resource. Here's a sample of that. Users will have the option of projecting words alone or words with notation. Worship resources may be projected as well. Here's a sample of words for worship and visual art. I apologize, there's a helicopter coming into my part of Goshen here. So if there's background noise, that's the reason. The Voices Together table of contents is modeled after Hymnal, a worship book, which centered the flow of worship in its organization. Voices Together features robust indexing, including a combined topics and uses in worship index that is some 34 pages in total. We're excited about the ways that all of these indexes will work together to promote a good user experience. In addition to songs, Voices Together includes 310 worship resources. At the back of the book, you'll find words for worship. These readings and prayers come from a diversity of sources. They represent 6 continents. They span more than 2,000 years. Some are written by Mennonites. Most come to us from the broader Christian tradition. These readings and prayers are intended for a diversity of occasions and contexts. In addition to resources to support different acts of worship and the seasons and days of the Christian year, there are resources for schools, camps, meetings, hospitals, homes, community vigils, and more. In the back of Voices Together, you will also find resources for the central practices of the church: baptism, communion, foot washing, church membership, church leadership, child blessing, marriage, healing, and funerals. These resources were developed specifically for Voices Together through a 3-year collaborative writing and testing process. In addition to the worship resources at the back of the hymnal, there are 12 pages spread through the book. On one side of each page, you'll find scripture readings chosen and arranged for use in worship. On the other side of the page, you will find a work of visual art. These 12 works of art were submitted or commissioned from Mennonite artists. The Worship Leader edition of Voices Together includes companion pieces for resources in the collection, including artist statements and suggestions for how to adapt the scripture resources, readings, and prayers. It includes additional resources for central practices. There are over 100 short essays on worship planning and shaping specific acts of worship, praying the congregational prayer, engaging children, exploring expansive language, and much more. The Worship Leader edition is intended for everyone involved in leading worship: song leaders, pastors, worship planners, and other leaders serving behind the scenes and in public. The process of selecting and adapting the worship resources and developing the Worship Leader edition was facilitated by Sarah Johnson. It involved collaboration and consultation with pastors and leaders across Canada and the United States. The resources in Voices Together were chosen for their durability and flexibility. They are intended to be used repeatedly, to be words and images, poetry and prayer, that we can return to again and again and discover new dimensions of meaning as our lives and the world around us change. We trust you will enjoy exploring the worship resources as well as songs in the months and years ahead. Learning about intercultural worship was another central priority for Voices Together. And Katie Graber serves as the Intercultural Worship Chair. Mennonite Church USA and Mennonite Church Canada congregations go by many names. Here's a 4-minute video compilation showing member congregations from ethnically, linguistically, and racially diverse communities. This is not wanting to run. Oh, sorry for this glitch. I apologize for this not playing. This video is available on YouTube, and I commend it to you for a sampling of how contemporary worship is an important intercultural crossroads. It's a crossroads for intercultural worship. Voices Together is designed to resource worship among hymnal using Mennonites, and it's meant to represent Mennonite worship more broadly than that. Mennonite Church USA and Mennonite Church Canada congregations worship in at least 25 languages every week, and Voices Together features over 40 world languages. It has an expanded range of songs from African American traditions and increasing songs with connections to Indigenous communities. Anabaptist contributors feature prominently in Voices Together with 131 songs from Anabaptist writers or composers, 110 worship resources from Anabaptist individuals or groups. Anabaptists with regional followings will now find a wider audience. From many cultural contexts and musical styles come contributions from Anabaptists. And the index of contributors also highlights Anabaptist contributors with a dot next to their name. And you can see that in this image. Voices Together features added hymns and worship resources from 16th century Anabaptists with an emphasis on women from that era. You'll find an engaging array of work from pre-Reformation sources as well. This chart shows content by century. The ascending bars quantify the tunes from each of those centuries. The descending bars show the number of texts from each of those centuries. We used the umbrella term popular idiom, PI for short, to talk about contemporary worship music and the many adjacent expressions that share popular influences. Daryl Neustetter-Barg and Annalie Leptison shared leadership in this area on our committee. 35 songs from mainstream CCLI circulation are included in Voices Together. Notably, the top CCLI song from as recent as 2019 is included, Build My Life. Far from being confined to praise and worship, contemporary worship music selections express a range of topics across the Voices Together table of contents. Survey responses reported heart songs that have never appeared in denominational collections. Popular examples that appear in Voices Together include 10,000 Reasons and Build Your Kingdom Here. In curating songs from contemporary worship, we cared for the inclusion of songs by women, songs loved by Mennonite communities in many languages, including English, and early contributions to the genre that have endured, including songs from the 1970s to the present. And we took an approach to notation meant to prioritize accessibility, where the roadmap is a guide and not a contract. Here, components of many contemporary worship music songs are on display: verse, refrain, and bridge, notated in an easy to follow format. The Tune and Accompaniment Committee is led by Benjamin Berge. One of the things we're excited about, features for tune and accompaniment, are symbols that are used at the bottom of the hymnal page. Two symbols indicate when specific resources are available for leaders. Some songs have available reference notes that give historical context and offer considerations for interpretation. That's the R symbol at the bottom of the page. These reference notes, indicated on the page with an R, are combined into a downloadable PDF and found at voicestogetherhymnal.org/resources. The musical note symbol indicates that the Voices Together Accompaniment Edition contains a notated accompaniment for this song. Chord symbols are indicated for pianists and guitarists for most hymns as a way of supporting many approaches to congregational song. Chords are arranged with the goal of being broadly accessible. The absence of an accompaniment symbol at the bottom is one indication that a song can work well without instruments. Adam Tice is the text committee chair for Voices Together, the text editor. Here we're excited to have words that speak honestly into complex realities: addiction, abuse, dementia, reproductive loss, the climate crisis. The text committee attended thoughtfully to poetry when considering revisions to historic texts. Extensive research went into this, including consulting earliest known sources. Sometimes this historical research inspired the text committee to introduce lesser known stanzas of known hymns. There's been so much generative work around caring for the words that we sing in Voices Together. Here's an example of a resource that's available to support conversations in your congregation around images of God. Find this and other downloadable resources, again, at voicestogetherhymnal.org/resources. And what's next in the Voices Together story? Of course, it's you. We commend this collection to you and wish you great joy as you explore. The image on the right is from a guide to adopting Voices Together, available at voicestogetherhymnal.org. Here you will find helpful frameworks for adopting a new collection with intentionality. And with that, we will transition to a time of questions and answers. I'll ask the committee to engage your videos. And thanks to Sarah. Sarah posted the guide to adopting Voices Together in the chat, so that's available for anyone to engage there. I'm going to ask the committee in the order designated earlier to please introduce yourselves, and then we'll take some time to answer questions.
My name is Benjamin Berge. I live in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and I am the music editor.
I'm Paul Dewick, and I live in Springsteen, Manitoba.
My name is Mike Hurd, and I'm in New Hamburg, Ontario.
My name is Katie Graber. I'm the Intercultural Worship editor, and I'm in Columbus, Ohio.
My name is Emily Grimes, and I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
I'm Tom Harder, and I live in Hillsborough, Kansas.
I'm Sarah Kathleen Johnson. I'm joining you from Toronto, Ontario, and I am the Worship Resources editor.
I'm Sejin Lee, and I am joining from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Annalie Leptison, coming to you from Ottawa, Ontario, and I was the co-chair of the Popular Idioms Committee.
I'm Cynthia Neufeld-Smith from Topeka, Kansas.
I'm Daryl Neustetter-Barg from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and co-chair of the Popular Idioms Subcommittee.
Thanks, everyone. It's great to be together. I'm sorry.
Sorry, do we have Alan? He was next on the list.
Thank
I'm
you, Adam.
I'm Alan Rudy Froese, and I live in Kitchener, Ontario, as well as Elkhart, Indiana. And I worked with Worship Resources.
And I'm Adam Tice, text editor. I live in Goshen, Indiana.
And I'm Amy Gingrich, publisher and executive director at Menno Media.
Good. It's great to be together in this way, and thank you to everyone participating for sharing in our excitement of this moment. It's always a good day when our committee can be together, and a lot of joy for us to be at this moment. I'm going to ask Amy if you would say a few words about updates on shipping and delivery of products.
You bet. This is at the top of everyone's mind, including people on this committee as well. I think if you subscribe to Menno Media Updates, you've seen some of the news about some of the shipping delays that we have encountered. Even though these files were uploaded to the printer in August, due to COVID outbreaks in multiple production plants, the printers for both the Pew edition and the accompaniment edition, we still don't have all those copies. Those two printers had to shut down temporarily, and that has significantly delayed the timeline for the delivery of both of those editions. We are eagerly awaiting this week the accompaniment edition and the second batch of the Pew edition. Those are both expected to reach our warehouse between December 16 and December 18. The projection edition is expected as well about the same time. And after that, which would be by late this week or early next week, which I realize is Christmas week, we will get to work right away on shipping out all the rest of the product to customers who have not yet received their orders. To recap here, no copies of the accompaniment edition or projection edition have yet arrived. Those arrive this week. In fact, I got the word from the printer yesterday on the accompaniment edition that those are done and they're being picked up tomorrow. We expect to receive the remaining 30,000 copies of the Pew edition this week as well. At this point, all Canadian orders, if you've ordered the Pew edition, it is on its way to you. If you've ordered the large print edition, if you've ordered the worship leader edition, all those have shipped out, congregational orders as well as individual orders. Canadian churches and individuals, your accompaniment books and copies of these other products that I mentioned that are still in production will ship out as soon as they arrive. With the remaining inventory that we had left after shipping out Canadian orders, we had enough left to start to ship out US orders to the farthest reaches in the US. So congregations in Alaska, Arizona, California, Oregon, and Washington, your orders for Pew edition, large print edition, worship leader edition are going out now. Many of you have ordered the CD audio recordings. Those CDs shipped out this last week if you order just the CDs. So hopefully those arrive for you ahead of Christmas. Remember, you can also order the digital versions of those audio albums at mennomedia.org in the US, mennomedia.ca in Canada. They're available from Amazon and iTunes. They are not available on streaming services. If you're searching for them on iTunes, be sure to search for Voices Together and add the word volume. There's lots of albums out there called Voices Together, so this will help you find them. If you are in the US and you've ordered merchandise, such as the face masks that say Voices Together, but not so close, a t-shirt or a tumbler mug, those should be shipping out now. If you're in Canada, you would have ordered those from the Common Word Resource Center. So check with Common Word on the status of your order. And those are our shipping updates, Bradley.
Thanks, Amy. So I think, Amy, I'm looking at you, but I think we can start taking questions. The first one.
Yes. So let's turn to some questions about breakdown that came in. Do you have an estimate of the percentage of songs written by men versus women? And I think Anna Lee is prepared to answer that one.
I can answer this one. I love this question. So in order to get a good sense for our breakdown in Voices Together, it's helpful to look back at what we saw as the breakdown in the hymnal worship book, Sing the Journey and Sing the Story. So just to contextualize our Voices Together numbers for you, from what we call the trilogy, that's insider lingo that you all know, from those three books that I mentioned, there were 16% of the authors of texts were women and 8% of the composers were women. And so we knew that we could do better than this, and did some work looking back in other hymnals that works by women, making sure we had given enough consideration to anything by women in the portal of submissions that we received, specifically with contemporary worship music, making sure that we had represented work by women, as they're often underrepresented there. So we really went back to look to make sure that we had really powerful and appropriate options by women, and we do. We have so many of them. So we're excited that 27% of the authors in Voices Together are women and 18% of the composers. So it's obviously we could go further and there's more work to do, but it's really helpful to compare that to where we came from and be proud of the progress we've made there.
Thanks, Anna Lee. Amy, are you queuing up the next question, or shall I take it?
I will raise the next question. I'm sending them to you as well, Bradley, in chat. Here, the next question is, what percentage of songs are arranged in 4-part a cappella? We're getting questions here on different breakdowns. And then also, what criteria did you as the committee use in deciding what music from hymnal worship book to include or not include?
We have a chart that shows the voicing question. Does somebody have that at their fingertips? I'd be glad to grab that if somebody wants to answer the question. Anna Lee has the chart.
Katie does too, but I can give the answer, absolutely. So this is in the Guide to Adopting Voices Together, which is available on the Voices Together website. So the breakdown of voicing is 58% 4-part, 31% unison, and 11% other.
And other means it's some combination of voices. So in some cases, that's one that alternates a unison passage and then it goes into 4-part for a refrain. In other cases, maybe it's 2 or 3-part, but fully, I think you said 58%, Annalie, is fully 4-part. And then the secondary question about what criteria did we use in deciding what music from Himmel worship book were or were not included. This certainly unfolded over time. The Heart Song survey that we conducted early in our process was an important check on that for us, especially late in the project when we had made a lot of preliminary decisions. We kind of held that Heart Song survey next to the decisions that the committee had made, and found there was really good parity between those two things, where the committee had come out really in a very similar place to what the survey information was showing. Especially in the top 100 most suggested trilogy songs, Hymnal Worship Book, Sing the Journey, Sing the Story. There was those lined up so closely with what we ended up choosing. Anybody wants to add to that? I would welcome you tagging in.
I'll take a little bit here. Theological considerations and considerations of worship were really important to us. What role does a particular song play in the worship of the Mennonite Church now and into the future? Does it still speak a language that is serving well in the church? And do we have other materials that are doing similar things to it? We only need a certain number of Advent songs. We only need a certain number of Lent songs. So there are some areas where there's a lot of competition. Does the material we have from the trilogy still live up to its vocation, or is it time to try new things? So there were lots and lots of questions of balance in terms of use, in terms of genre, and in terms of theology to take into consideration.
Let's talk about organization a little bit. Foothills Mennonite asks, how in the world did you organize this many submissions of musical resources? How did you begin to sort through that?
I love that question. I will jump in on that, and if any colleagues want to add, you may. A lot of spreadsheets is the short answer. So we devised a system of screening where we established a process whereby for a song or a worship resource to reach full committee discussion, it had to receive 2 affirmations from a screening team of 3. So we divided the committee into screening groups to go through large quantities of material. And if there were 2 yeses, the screeners would say yes or no. And yes meant send it to the full committee. No meant let's set this aside. And so if it got 2 out of 3 yeses, then it came to full committee for a rating system. So committee members then went to a spreadsheet that allowed them to enter a 5-star response. And so we gave it one star, meaning this is highly problematic, let's not use it. And 5 meant this is exceptional and it's really essential for Voices Together. So those rating systems helped us sort of navigate through quite a lot of material. That's one way of answering your question. A lot of spreadsheets, a lot of the project management software that we used is called Trello, and that was another key organizational structure for us.
People are asking about memories as well. Favorite memories from being part of this process of assembling a new hymnal, as well as could someone share a story about a favorite new song personally in terms of maybe dealing with a difficult topic?
I'm looking at my colleagues here. Who's ready to share? I have one that's both a memory and a beloved song from Voices Together. And of course, when I'm on the spot, I'm going to blank on what it's called. But I recall, we shared earlier about 2,300 submissions of new and original material. And half of those submissions were from Anabaptist writers. And I can remember a meeting early in our process. We met 3 times annually in person, and we did a lot of Zoom calls in between meetings. But I remember a time early in our process when we were just starting to test out the submissions portal, and we were finding that to be a really rewarding experience of receiving these things that were so lovingly offered. At the same time, it was fairly few and far between that we found something that excited us. And I remember a day when everyone sort of sat forward as we were singing and said, there's something here. And it's the song by Christopher and Maria Clymer-Kurtz. And someone's going to help me with the title.
Solemn Stillness.
Solemn Stillness, Weary Streets. And it is number 276.
I can share a story, an embarrassing story about myself. So part of the process was that at first everything was anonymized. When we looked at material, the Karen Gonzel, who was our administrative assistant or whatever at the beginning, would do whatever that took to take away the names of composers or authors. So we wouldn't be biased by any, personal connections, pro or con. So when we got together for our in-person sessions, we would sing through these things, which was, of course, one of the most wonderful parts of this whole process, was just singing all this wonderful stuff together. And we sing pretty well together, and that was really fun. But there was one point, I don't remember which song it was, where I thought some of the wording was awkward. And I made some stupid comment about maybe this was written by a non-native English speaker. Well, it turned out later it was by Adam. But I didn't know that at the time. But that was one of those little silly comments that I made. It turned out we really loved a lot of what Adam did and contributed, and we had to sort of limit Adam's material because there was way too much of Adam Tice. But it just he just does wonderful work, and you'll see so much of that in the collection.
I'll add, that was also one of my favorite stories. That song was Zisu Ni A, which is a song that we learned from the Mennonite congregation that worships in Chin, the Chin language in Houston. And it's a quickly moving song that they taught us originally in Chin, and Adam wrote a translation of it. And so that's what Cynthia was saying. Maybe this translation, we need a native speaker to do this translation. So that's been a joke ever since.
And to be fair, I fixed the translation after that.
Oh yeah, it's perfect now.
Well, if I could share a worship resource, I know they don't always have quite the same heart song capacity, but the communion resources in Voices Together were developed by the Central Practices group through lots of writing, lots of consultation, lots of testing, and there's just a wonderful, diverse set of 6 different expressions of communion. And I'm always hesitant to choose a favorite, but one resource that I'm especially excited about is a form of communion with space for informal community sharing in it, and that has space to share how we come, what we're thankful for, the prayers that we offer as we gather with one another at the table. It's in the Worship Leader edition. I'd love to hear about churches exploring what it's like to use it on Zoom as well as in person. So I'd encourage you to explore that series of resources, and I'm so grateful to the Central Practices group who are part of developing them.
I'm going to piggyback on that question because I think this question from Gwen pushes that out in a nice way. What's one thing you learned either about God or about yourself or each other in this process? Someone who hasn't answered a question yet want to chime in?
I can share. I felt like this process was a practice of really deeply committing to God's call to love God with all our hearts, minds, and soul, and love ourselves and our neighbors as ourselves. And because when you're working in a committee, you don't always have the same background or same theologies or same beliefs you're bringing in, and you always hold that in conjunction to each other, and also in remembering that this work is for the church ultimately, and so really holding together that tension of being able to voice what I believe and what I think really needs to be shared within the church, but also being attentive to what others are sharing and their beliefs and their cultures and the places that they're coming from. And ultimately, all of that somehow mysteriously serving the church. And so this process has taught me to love God with all our heart, mind, and soul, and also love our neighbors as ourselves. And that's something that I had to continue to go back to as I engaged in this work.
I'll add that another thing that we learned, and I mean, there were so many things that we each could name. I'm sure it's struggling to figure out which one should I chime in with. But I will say we learned a lot about the word balance. That's a word we used. All the heads, yeah. And I mean, a lot of it stems from what Sejin was just saying, and that as we were really grateful to have taken that first year to do a lot of intentional work around listening and reaching out, and we still heard throughout the 4 years and continue to this day, and that was really important to hear because we each have our own communities and they are as broad as they can be, but ultimately we needed to be reaching out and seeing both the representation within the broader church within Canada and the USA, and thinking about listening from our theologians and pastors and others about where the church is going, and it being both representational and prophetic as a collection that is beyond ourselves, yet still made up of ourselves. And so recognizing those limitations and preparing each meeting, realizing this is not just about us. And that it's for our next generation. I had a child during the course of this process, and I'm ready to receive a second one in a couple months, and realizing that this collection is for them. And that was something that kept me going many, many times.
Drawbacks, merits, possible changes. Those are 3 words that stick in my mind. Every meeting that we were together, we talked about drawbacks of songs, merits, and possible changes, and different perspectives. And what people have already said, that we have a deep respect for one another. Of course, we had different opinions about the songs that were submitted, and of course that are part of the trilogy. And we grew and have grown immensely from the first time we met, and it's been quite the journey of working together to produce this incredible collection.
Katie, would you take this question on cultural appropriation?
Yes. The question is, what did we do to make sure that our inclusion of global song is not just cultural appropriation? And I'll say first that no matter what we do, it's still up to every community to make decisions and build relationships and approach intercultural worship very carefully and with relationships as central. But a few things we attended to was, first of all, to listen, just as we did with all the other issues, trying to listen to the church and think about what is actually being sung in Mennonite congregations and around the world and not assume that we know what Chinese music should sound like or what Spanish language music should sound like. And so that means that there are many sounds that you will hear in Voices Together in many different languages, and maybe some of them will be surprising to you. Another thing is balance, as we talked about with everything else, trying to balance languages and stories, and just a lot of research into the stories behind songs. When we could make personal connections with the writers, there are quite a few Anabaptist writers from non-English speaking cultures in Voices Together. So when we could make contact with them, that was great, or just learn about stories about where the songs came from.
I'll just add that whenever we had the opportunity to ask someone from a direct context that we were working around, we would ask the question, is this a song that, are you open to us worshiping with you by adopting this song into our collection?
We have just a couple minutes left, if you can believe it already. The time goes quickly. Here tonight, Amy has asked a question about the service tonight and if that could be streamed for congregations. We have secured permission based on the number of attendees that we project watching this tonight and watching it on YouTube. So we did not secure the permissions with all of your congregations in mind. We will be posting the recording of this tonight on YouTube. And we have secured permissions for that. And we will be posting this on our Voices Together Facebook page as well. YouTube link will be there too. So that's what I can say about the permissions for that. I had a couple direct questions about the audio albums from people and permissions related to that. People have asked, if I purchase these audio albums, can I stream them for my church's worship service? So the files are intended for use by the purchaser only, and the files come saying that if you purchase the download or the CD. So any unauthorized downloading or distribution or sharing of those files would be a violation of copyright law. However, if you want to use them in congregational worship, your congregation just needs the streaming license to do so. So you can find on our website the songs that are on those albums. And then if your church has a CCLI license or a onelicense.net license, and you secure those licenses, you are able to use those recordings in worship, if that differentiation makes sense. Copyright is one thing and licensing is something else. So I'll just name that as well, trying to answer that one. We're going to grab a screenshot of all the questions that are still there, that are yet unanswered, and our team at Menno Media will work on answering these on the Voices Together Facebook page. I want to say thank you so much to our Voices Together committee, friends. These folks here have demonstrated so much talent and energy and creativity, love for God, love for the church in these last 4 years. So even though we can't see the 653 participants still with us here tonight, raise your hands and give all of these folks a big thanks. So Bradley and Katie and Daryl and Annalie and Sarah and Adam, Benjamin, Sejin, Emily, Cynthia, Tom, Paul, Mike, and Alan. Thank you so much. We as a church are just tremendously grateful for all that you have done. And thank you to everyone who has joined us here for this virtual launch celebration. We had about 1,500 people register to attend this event and many more who couldn't come tonight but do plan to watch it later on our social media channels. Again, this webinar has been recorded. It will be posted to the Voices Together Facebook page and the Menno Media YouTube channel later this week. 2 final announcements. First, this webinar is just the first of 3 virtual launch events. The next one will happen in conjunction with the Music and Worship Leaders Retreat at Lauraville Retreat Center on January 9. So mark your calendars. Future virtual launch events will take place on March 10 and May 6. Don't forget to check out voicestogetherhymnal.org. There are many resources posted there. Many of your questions are actually related to resources that are posted on the website. So this is where you'll find out more information on upcoming launch events and so much more. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening.